Welcome back to On Texas Football for this week's edition of the Recruiting Breakdown. I'm CJ Vogel, joined by always with Gerry Hamilton here. Of course, Texas is changing here, Gerry. You know, they're number one now. And when it comes to recruiting, that might mean a little bit. So we'll dive into that, of course. We'll talk about who's visiting this weekend for the ULM game, as well as, of course, some flip targets down the road to finish out this 2025 Texas recruiting class. But to being number one in the country, what does that mean for Texas, Gerry? What does that mean on recruiting trail? And is it now all of a sudden Texas can go out and get whoever they want?
No, definitely not. But it means you can continue getting more national recruiting battles, especially battles in the Southeast region. But I would caution this. I think Texas is in a great spot in recruiting. This is exactly why Steve Sarkisian took the job. This is the vision he had. It's all great. The one thing I think will come from being number one and continue to have success 2 years in a row, you're going to be able to get more kids on campus. And that's the big thing. The more guys, high-level players you can get on campus multiple times, the continuation of your evaluation process, the better that will continue to get. And it's just more battles you can get in. And the more battles you can get in, the more battles you can win. But is Texas going to get everybody? Absolutely not. I mean, we'll get into some of these guys, but Texas is in a bunch of national battles in the Southeast region for players or in Texas. I mean, you're not going to win all those battles again, but you want to cast a big enough net of top prospects to where you can look up on signing day every year and say, you know what? We have another top five class. We have another top five class. We have the number 3 ranked class. I mean, that's where you want to be. And then you can go fill your needs remaining in the portal. And if Texas does that on an annual basis under Steve Sarkisian, they're going to be a fixture in the college football playoff.
Let me get your thoughts on that real quick before we get to our sponsor and some of these flip targets, Gerry. But when you talk about being a national program, Texas has had success in the Southeast. They've had success, out in California, Arizona. They're going up to the Northeast now in the 26th class for a couple kids. When you are ranked number one and you do get those headlines, how often or how early do you start to see that success kind of trickle down into the upcoming classes as guys start to pick and choose where they want to go to see trips and games?
Yeah, I think it's already begun. It begun when Arch Manning signed with Texas a little bit. And I'll just story. So I was at Grayson High 2 weeks ago for practice to go see Nick Brooks, Joseph Mbaktu, who we'll get to, Tyler Atkinson, the stud 2026 linebacker. And a couple of parents of players on that team who are big-time prospects, all they wanted to talk about was Arch Manning coming to Texas, right, and about the Texas program. So it started when Arch signed with Texas, committed and signed with Texas. But then last season, I think it escalated it. But now what's going to happen is, if you just go search YouTube right now, either Texas number one or Arch Manning, I mean, look at how many more shows there are versus a year and a half ago, 2 years. It's an amazing difference. So I think, look, I call it cool school. Texas is becoming a cool school. They weren't for over a decade. They're becoming a cool school again on the recruiting trail. And where that pays dividends is in the states of Florida and Georgia and those Southeast states. Those kids now want to come on campus and check out what Texas is all about. And that's all you can ask for out of a program is get those guys on campus, get enough of those guys on campus to where you can win enough of those battles. But to your point, CJ, it began with Arch. The season Quinn came on, had a great season last year for Texas. They make the college football playoff. Now it's just kind of built and built and built. Then winning at Michigan. I mean, you kind of put it all together. And it's here. It's here for Steve Sarkisian and staff. And they're going to have to start making some tougher decisions in 2026 and 27 because they're going to have more kids wanting to commit early. And that's where you get into Sark is the late game guy. That's where it gets tougher for a staff that likes to play the long game.
Yeah, I was going to say committing early is going to be a challenge, but also flipping late is something that Texas will get the benefit of as a result of this run. Before we get to those flip candidates and where Texas will be making some movements as the season continues, Gerry, quick word about our sponsor, Mark Saunders and Allstate.
Yeah, speaking of flip targets, if you're not with Mark Saunders, you should be when it comes to protecting all your stuff. Wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some good news. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent you'll need to help keep tabs on protection for all your stuff, everything from your home, car and boat to your motorcycle, ATV, and RV. If you got that, call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today, 512-218-8571. Do what so many other On Texas Football family members have done. Make the flip to Mark Saunders. Are you in good hands? You'll be in great hands with Mark Saunders. Again, give him a call today, 512-218-8571.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Mark Saunders, for sponsoring this weekend's recruiting breakdown. All right, Texas has 20 commits in the 2025 class. They're sitting right on that edge of the 5 and 6 spot, depending on where you go to see rankings in the recruiting world. But there are plenty of options available. And you just mentioned Sarkisian and his staff love to go about the long game in recruiting, especially around this time when you start to see the results trickle in. You got, again, the number 1 ranking by your side. We'll start on the defensive line because there's been a lot of movement there as of late. And, of course, Texas just hosted Joseph Mbachu, the Florida commit out of Georgia. Jerry, what's that defensive line world looking like right now for the 25 class? And what about Kevin Wynn and some of these other guys that are now, perhaps looking around after a pretty, poor start to the FSU season?
Well, the key with the defensive line class is the whole thing's going to be flips. When you consider Sharma was once committed to Oregon, Charles was once committed to FSU. Both those guys flipped to Texas. Now, Joseph Mbaktu, who was on campus, I'll go through these guys in a second a little bit. Mbaktu was on campus last week and is a current Florida commitment. I don't think he'll end up at Florida. That will be Texas, Alabama, Georgia. Will be the 3 schools I'm really watching there long term. Then you asked about Kevin Wynn, current FSU commitment, Georgia, Tennessee, Texas, all in it. I think he may get to campus later this season. Mbaktu will be back, by the way, for his official visit to the Georgia game. He was on campus with his father last week, and that visit went really well. And then you look at Chase Sims from Richmond Randall, who I saw last Thursday. He was completely dominant in that game. Committed to Texas A&M. We've had him a 4-star forever. Some people saw him as a 3, and I don't understand it. But Chase Sims, if Texas gets him, he officially visits Mississippi State. If those conversations go well, I like Texas' chances. That would be a flip. And then you have also in that group out there, defensive line, a couple other guys, Walter Mathis from Savannah Calvary Day, that's committed to LSU. Well, I think there's a chance he visits for the Mississippi State game. Of course, he's committed elsewhere. So you look around, Texas still talks to Zion Williams every day at left guard. I think that's a long shot. But if you look around, everybody would be a flip. So when we say flip targets, that's all there is on the defensive line for Texas right now. And so it'll be interesting to see where they go. But I like the net they have cast. Now they got to do is bring in 2 more big fish.
Yeah, of course. This cycle probably an anomaly. I'm not sure you're going to be able to have as much success with the flips at a single position down the road, but I think this is a good learning cycle for Texas on the defensive line, and maybe some other positions as well. When you talk about casting that wide net, you look at cornerback potentially as a spot that maybe we're like a few more targets on the board. Linebacker has had really 3 or 4 the entire cycle, but in the sense that you're able to come in late and steal away a few guys for your class. Texas in a good spot there. I want to get to wide receiver. Flipping on over, of course, Texas has 2 really talented kids in the class already, but we continue to hear the name Kelshawn Johnson as a target, always hearing about the name DeCorian Moore as a potential target from Texas fans wanting to know the latest. Real quick on the wide receiving front right there, Jerry, what's the latest there? And is DeCorian even in play for Texas?
The only prospect that we know is planning to come to Texas for a game this year, committed elsewhere, and again, it'll be a flip at wide receiver, is Kelshawn Johnson. He told On Texas Football last week he plans to be at the Georgia game. Obviously, Texas A&M commitment. A&M will get him on campus a couple more times, and then it'll come down to really where Kelshawn wants to be. People asked about DeCorian Moore. I spoke with somebody close to that camp last week. There's no plans to attend the game. There's not really anything moving there. DeCorian, I think he's made 2 decisions to go away from home already in this recruiting process. So it would take a big about face for Texas to actually win that recruitment. And then there's Dallas Wilson out of Tampa, committed to Oregon. Again, long shot. Texas already has 2 bigger outside wide receivers. Now French can move around a little bit. Lockett is a true X. So I don't know. I think Texas is looking for a speedier guy. Another guy, if there's a fourth guy to mention, is Dalen McCutcheon, the FSU commitment. I know Texas remains in contact with him. I think, CJ, you touched base with his camp recently. Again, no visit set up yet. So the only guy that is Kelshawn Johnson. And for those of you that watched Isaiah Bond streak down the sidelines last weekend, I think that's why Sark likes Kelshawn Johnson.
Yeah. And to your point, Dalen McCutcheon, another guy Texas could certainly poach away.
Andre Moore mold, if people are looking for a comparison.
Yes. Very route specific. Precision is kind of the name of the game there. You don't have the Kelshawn Johnson speed, but what you will have is a guy who can get open rather easily against some of the best, defensive backs and corners in the state of Texas because of his technician and route ability there. Now, flipping over to the other side of the ball, Jerry, we talked about it. Texas still needs to add to that defensive back room. They got Jonah Williams, got Caleb Chester. Still needs to be additional bodies added to this 2025 class back deep. Where do they go? Flip's been the name of the game so far. I'm sure that's going to be a priority for the Texas staff. Who do they go to? Where do they go? Who do they look at?
Yeah, so I have 3 in-state guys that I think Texas remains in contact with. And I say remains in contact, there's loose communication. Texas is playing the long game here. And the first thing I want to say is Texas is Sark called it deep sea fishing. We'll call it deep sea fishing. That's going after the bigger guys, maybe guys that they've gone after before that went other places. If Texas doesn't get one of these guys flipped, a corner flip, they're fine going to the portal. I 100% believe that. Talking to a source on Monday. So the guys to know, Kobe Sellers, obviously at Shadow Creek, a corner that Terry Joseph has recruited heavily the entire time. He committed to A&M over Oklahoma in the summer. There remains communication there. Devin Sanchez has picked up the phone when Texas has called for months, but will it go anywhere? That's the 5-star corner, North Shore, committed to Ohio State. Then there's Dorian Brew, who is the corner, nickel safety, to be determined, but a really talented defensive back at Conroe High, obviously originally from Ohio, committed to Oregon. Look, those guys have to show up on campus for me before anything gets really real. They have to come out to a Texas game this year. Now, what Texas has going for them is, just come on up and watch Texas, Georgia. Just come on up and watch us play against Georgia. No harm, no foul. But that's how recruiting goes, right? Because that Georgia visitor list is going to be stellar. Everybody and their friends are going to want to be there. And then you have a couple out-of-state guys, and I say this, extreme long shots. Dejon Lee from Mission Hills committed to Alabama, a near 5-star prospect, and a lay-down 5-star prospect. Naeem Offord out of Birmingham, Parker, committed to Ohio State. Has some ties to some people at the Texas team, but I don't know if that's really going to be enough. He's been solidly committed to Ohio State, although Oregon and Alabama are definitely still trying to get him. But those are pretty much the guys. Now, I'm not ruling out a senior year offer that could take it from flip candidate. Well, it's still probably be a flip candidate, but a senior year offer being added to the mix, but that hasn't popped up yet. So we'll see. I know Texas would like to have another corner in this class. Then at safety, it's a little more interesting, CJ, because in speaking with somebody close to Carrollton High program, the 2026 4-star plus safety Zealous Hicks that committed to Texas last week, there's some chatter he could reclass to 25. But in order for him to do that, he'd have to go to at least one summer session, maybe 2. So he wouldn't be able to get to Austin until August if he wanted to do that. So that's definitely not a for sure thing happening. It's kind of in the balance whether that could happen or not. So would Texas take another safety in this class, or would they go to the portal? I think Texas is content going for the biggest and best players they can find at the defensive back position, and if not, go to the portal. And with the success of Andrew Makuba, why would you be worried if you have to go to the portal?
Yeah. And also in regards to the 2024 recruiting class and how much success they had in getting those guys at the defensive back spot on campus, Jerry, is it important for Texas to go out there and add a 4 or 5 person class at the DB spot, or can they be pretty picky with who they decide to pursue later on the cycle and, again, use the portal as maybe some insurance later on?
Yeah, I think at corner they can be picky, and I think that's what you're seeing the strategy because, look, we talk about the players on the field, but Santana Wilson's been really good. There's the thought in Austin he's going to be a good player at corner for Texas. Javion Cole, I mean, he hasn't played much. He got 13 snaps. Saturday was the most he's played, but he's a junior. Manny Muhammad, sophomore, right? The only Gavin Holmes and Barron will be gone, obviously, but Kobe Black running second team. So there's some depth there in the younger group at corner. So if you had to go to the portal for a corner, that would probably make a lot of sense in a way, because you're still going to be young with a Kobe Black, with a Santana Wilson after losing a lot of experience in Barron and Gavin Holmes. So it might make some sense to go to the portal at corner in this class. Safety wise, that one's pretty obvious. I mean, Jonah Williams, he'd be a December graduate from Galveston Ball and enroll. He's going to factor in. I mean, and if you think about safety, you're only set to lose Makuba, who, by the way, has been the best safety by far for Texas this year. He's elevating in the NFL draft. But you still have Derek Williams, Michael Taft, Jordan Johnson-Rebel, Xavier Filsaime, Jelani McDonald, and Jonah Williams. That's a pretty good starting spot. It would have to be a really good player out of the portal for you to go that direction. So at portal, more than likely at corner than safety. But that we just illustrated why Texas doesn't. They can be picky and choosy and go deep sea fishing, as Sark likes to call it, because it's the 26 class at corner that's going to be really big for the Horns out of high school.
Of course, there's probably some tiers there for the cornerback spot in terms of where they want to flip. Dorian Brew, Kobe Sellers, Devin Sanchez, probably on that top one. But a few other names that Texas was at least interested in earlier in this cycle. That's Ramon Adams out of Bastrop. That's Jason Stokes out of Pflugerville-Weiss, and Zay Gentry out of McKinney up in the DFW area, committed to SMU. So we'll continue to monitor there. But right now, to your point, deep sea fishing is where Texas wants to go in their 2025 recruiting class. All right, before we talk about some visitors for this upcoming weekend, Jerry, quick word about our sponsor, Mark Saunders and Allstate.
Yeah, for OTF community, this is your flip candidate right here. When it comes to protecting all your stuff, wouldn't it be great to have one place that protects it all? Here's some good news if you're looking to flip and find that. Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders is the only insurance agent you'll need to help keep tabs on protection for all your stuff. Everything from that home, car, and boat to the motorcycle, RV, and even an ATV if you got one of those, which a lot of people do in Texas. Call Texas Allstate agent Mark Saunders' office today at 512-218-8571. Again, that's 512-218-8571. Thank you very much to Texas alum Mark Saunders on being the sponsor of the Recruiting Breakdown.
Perfect. Thank you, Jerry. And thank you again, Mark Saunders, for sponsoring the Recruiting Breakdown. All right. A few visitors to be aware of who's going to be on campus for this ULM game. Of course, Texas will be under the lights once again. You'll get to see DKR with all the pyrotechnics, the smoke, the whole shebang, basically, of what's to come. A few names I wanted to mention first. 2026 Temple Edge Jamarian Carlton will be on campus for this game. I actually just mentioned him, and kind of a way too early look ahead at potential prospects for the 2026 class. He was on campus over the summer, received his offer at the elite camp on June, and was back for the pool bash in July. Braylon Edwards, an interesting one out of Duncanville, 2026 safety, really talented kid up there. And Jalen Lott, Jerry, I want to get your thoughts on Jalen Lott. What's he best suited to play? Because I know that he's a guy that's had big time plays at wide receiver. He looks like a cornerback. Also, he's got some Texas ties there with his father in the Texas Hall of Honor. What are your thoughts on Jalen Lott real quick?
Well, you can't find a father that was a better high jumper. I mean, James Lott was a 7.4 3/4 high jumper. But Jalen Lott, I'm not just giving this lip service. He's legitimately a top 100 prospect in the country, wide receiver or corner. So it's like Nick Townsend in this class. You could play tight end, you could play outside rush linebacker, and you're a top 100 prospect either way in the country. That's where I believe Jalen Lott is. I think he's just a tremendous natural playmaker. Got great feet, got great hips. Got great acceleration and quickness. He's a big-time guy. He told us he'll be at ULM game, and then he'll be back for the Georgia game as well. But I'm not – this is a recruitment, obviously, Texas should win. We'll see how it plays out. But he is one of the top prospects in the country. And again, that kind of goes back to our conversation on DB. He could factor in the 2026 corner recruiting. Also wide receiver. I mean, a kid like that watching the Texas offense, it's probably going to be hard to say, well, just go play corner when you're seeing Isaiah Bond and Worthy and what those guys, those playmakers can do. But he could do it on either side of the ball. Jonah Williams will be on campus as well this weekend.
Yeah. That's a big addition as well to this visitors list, Jerry. Going back to Locke real quick about his cornerback potential. Remember, he was at Lovejoy for his first 2 years. of high school going against Parker Livingstone, Dalen McCutcheon. These guys in practice each day as that number one cornerback. That means something as you talk about development. One other name I wanted to mention, Braylon Williams out of Arlington Lamar High School, talented prospect there. Offers from Colorado, Ohio State, Texas Tech, Baylor, Arkansas, among many others. He's expected to be on campus this week as well. So
I got one more, CJ. 2027 Richmond Randall running back. I should have mentioned him, Landon Williams Callis, a kid that Tashard Choice is recruiting as heavily as he can for a 27 prospect. But saw him last Thursday, 5'7.5", 180, 185 pounds, really well put together, runs 10.7 in the 100 meters. He may not fit the mold of the running back Sark's been recruiting, but he's really, really good. He's plans to be at the game Saturday as well as the Georgia game. So, and that list will continue to build. I mean, the issue Texas is going to have, CJ, is more guys are going to want to come to the game.
Yes.
And so that becomes the issue. By the way, I hit up KJ Ford from Duncanville. He's going to be at Mississippi State and Georgia game. So one of the top juniors in the state at that edge position is him and Jamarian Carlton. Texas is going to get both of those guys on campus multiple times this season.
Well, good deal, Jerry. Listen, it's going to be a bit of a quieter, I think this week will be a bit quieter as Texas builds up to the SEC opener against Mississippi State. And then obviously Georgia, that visitors list might go a few pages long here. But listen, as long as Texas is hosting these recruits, and of course there will be some area kids, probably Westlake and Lake Travis and Vandergrift coming to campus this week as Texas continues to, kind of treat their backyard very well. 2 home games this season. But hey, we'll continue to keep you all updated here On Texas Football. Jerry, thank you for all the insight and the knowledge on the recruiting breakdown. Mark Saunders, thank you very much for sponsoring this weekend's recruiting breakdown. I'm CJ Vogel. That's Gerry Hamilton. And this has been On Texas Football. Y'all have a good one. Till next week. Welcome.